Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Behind the Veil. I'm your host, Keith Willard. Welcome back to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about rudeness, right? Because in the modern day, it is amazing how etiquette has changed dramatically, just both in person and social media wise. And our guest today, Richie Frieman, is considered a modern day Renaissance man. And this man's resume is crazy. First of all, he already hosts his own Modern Manners Guide podcast, which is super popular, but also a best-selling author, illustrator, and a pro wrestler. So this is going to be a really interesting conversation. But before I bring him on, let me bring on my co-host, Marcy Gutenberg, with an affair to remember by Marcy. Hey, Marcy.
Hello.
So, okay, first of all, let's just get this out of the way. I didn't know this before, but Helene Parsons, who was on the show last year, this is his mom.
Yes,
oh my God.
It is. Yes, it is. And I've known him for a long time.
So it's just crazy because obviously manners are genetic. Because we love his mom. Oh my God, she's the most amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, let's not be rude. Let's bring him on. Hey, Richie, welcome.
Hi, Richie.
Hey there. How are you?
Good.
So your resume is just crazy. So first of all, let's talk about the fact that you have your own podcast, Modern Manners Guide podcast.
Mm-hmm.
How did the title of Modern Day Renaissance Man come to being, and then the podcast? Like, how did that all happen?
Well, look, I think the podcast definitely adds to the modern day Renaissance man persona, so that definitely helps. But I started the podcast. It kind of came to me also too. So I was presented with an opportunity to be Modern Manners Guy a little over 10 years ago. And they were looking for somebody that had a not so much a hoity-toity look at it, which I'm not, more of like a comedy Seinfeld-ish approach to, talking about the annoying things you witness every day.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, I'm your guy. And, I had already written a few books, and the person who reached out to me had known more about my personality and thought it'd be a good fit. And then one thing led to another. And we had a book come out from that a couple of years after I started, just to almost celebrate the 10th anniversary of it recently. So it was really, really a lot of fun. And then I stopped for a little while and then came back, and it's just been fantastic. And it's Modern Manners Guy is through Quick and Dirty Tips, which is part of the Macmillan Publishing Network. And it's been a blast. A lot of fun.
Well, I just find it, fascinating that you come from pro wrestling and you don't always associate pro wrestling with manners. Let's just
why is that? I don't understand. I don't know why you would believe that, Keith. It's actually what you're thinking. The hillbillies in the back locker room. We're all very gentlemanly. It's not.
Oh, I bet.
Yes, but well, look, I will say that the moniker of a modern day Renaissance man. I am very, very happy and appreciative of that title, but I really consider myself a professional trier. I mean, obviously, wrestling has zero to do with pretty much anything else in my life, but on paper. Now, I will say, though, and I make a very hard argument. I mean, my whole life, I've always wanted to be two things. Even though my brother's bar mitzvah, he announced to me like the candle lighting ceremony. It's like, one day my brother's either going to be a famous artist or a wrestling champion. And so I got to be somewhat of both. I'll take that.
I was about to say, you were both.
Yeah, it's the only thing I've ever really was really good at. And I will say, you mentioned my mom previously. She wasn't exactly too thrilled to find out. Hey, Mom, here's my new way to make a couple bucks. And let alone when you tell you're going to be an art major in college, it doesn't exactly go well too. But I started wrestling early on. Always wrestled growing up. Was always a fan, and I thought it'd be fun to do. I had a best friend of mine who was my tag team partner till I retired, and without him, I wouldn't have done it. And we kind of pushed each other along. But I will say it was an eye opener. But it did really it really brought out a new side of me. I was never a shy person per se, but it's entertainment, it's theater, it's action, but you got to be a presence, and not everybody's going to like you. And if you're a bad guy or a good guy, or how you present yourself. So I will say that there was the art form of it, and it is an art form, Keith.
I know. It's it is.
But yeah. So I mean, it was great. I mean, it really brought me more out of my shell and gave me more confidence. And I will say, once I started doing that, it made the idea of doing other things much easier to tackle. And that's it. You know, if I could handle that part, and I definitely don't look the part, it would make trying to become a writer or reaching out to somebody or, you know, reaching out to somebody else in a networking event from another area of interest I had. And it made that step became a lot easier because I kind of put myself out there anyway. And, you know, if you're shaving your body and covered in baby oil in front of, you know, a couple hundred, you know, backyard people and in the middle of West Virginia, you begin to realize that you can do pretty much anything. Okay, I'll tell you.
Welcome to my Saturday night. I'm just saying. Just saying, typical Saturday night.
Yeah, pushing yourself out there and you know, being on all the time is kind of like, you know, you're in a hypermobile.
Yeah,
so to speak.
I will say though, interesting. Well, you know, look, there's thousands of interesting stories from there, but it was, you know, a lot of times I would be driving home from, you know, a couple states away or whatever, and it's late at night, and you know, I change out of my gear into like, you know, like sweatpants or whatever, but I would have like, you know, there'd still be a couple of cuts and bruises on me, or at the time my hair was gelled up as high as it possibly go, and I got pulled over for like speeding or, you know, whatever it was. Like I remember I got pulled at least twice. This one area always got me. It went from like 50 to 30 to 40 and like always got me. And there I am, and trying to explain what it looked like at, you know, 11:30 at night and explain where I came from. And they're like, okay, whatever. How much you been drinking? I'm like, no, I swear.
Oh God. You're like, no, this is how it normally is. Okay. I'll beat you on that. I got pulled over and dragged once. So, okay. Just not a good sign in Texas, FYI.
So that I have not done. So I will.
But so when it comes to the rudeness factor, right? I mean, do you feel like we're ruder now than we've been in the past? Are people like, now that we've got social media and there's a distance and you're behind the keyboard, so to speak?
Yes.
Are we ruder as a society?
Well, I think the availability to become ruder has made it more acceptable almost. There's a humor factor of it. Everybody thinks they're a comedian. Everybody thinks they're funny. I always call it when I wrote in my book, Reply All and Other Ways to Tank Your Career, I mentioned the word, so you talk about, you know, that's awesome. A lot of stories, but
it's funny.
When I call it keyboard muscles, you know, everybody's big and brave behind the keyboard, behind the text, and very rarely are they able to say it in public. But then again, they're also feel like this sense of entitlement, I guess, or ability, because you're able to do a lot of things online. I mean, you get these people that feel like they make a post on somebody's social media and about trying to be funny or trying to be rude, and all of a sudden it powers them because somebody liked it. And it's almost like if you look at a lot like the hooliganism in sports, if you look at like, you know, if you ever heard of like the hooligans in European soccer and they all get enraged and things like that, and one echoes to the next, it's very similar, I find, in the fact that people get this entitlement to do whatever they want to do and say what they want to say. And sadly, it's only getting worse, but I do think that it's getting worse from an accessibility standpoint. Right. But it tends to cap out once you reach a certain point in your life, whether it's professionalism, whether it's just, you know, meeting new people or different environments. That tends to change, because once you get shut down by an attempt of being a jerk, it tends to mean a lot going forward.
Interesting. So, you know, so rudeness is almost encouraged by society until somebody's actually confronted about it.
Well, I think it's almost like bullying in a way, you know, like bullying, bullies because they can, until somebody stands up and knocks them out and says, no, I'm not doing it anymore. So in the same sense, I think there is I'm not saying I believe everybody's a good person. I think that sometimes their personality can get the better of them, and look, nobody's perfect. You get a chance to be rude. I mean, let's not say it ever. I don't walk around, you know, just, you know, yes, please, thank you all the time. I mean, I get upset, but it's more about just at what level and what degree you're turning it up. And I think that there's really not a spot. And really,
sorry about that. We just had lightning.
explosion?
Lightning near us. Oh God, that would just scared the crap out of me. Don't mean to be rude, but that scared the crap out of me.
That's not rude. That's honest. That's different. Look, if that was an explosion, in that case, you're allowed to cuss and do whatever you want to do. So,
I'm just saying that the joys of a live show.
Yeah.
Like, all right. Well, so what is like now like the most accepted? Two questions here. What is considered like the rudest thing currently at the point that people tend to do most often? Right. And what is the most acceptable rudest thing that people are willing to do at this point in time? Right. So the two questions there.
Yeah. So good question. And I will say it's almost like I have like my Mount Rushmore of like rude things. And I will say it depends upon there's situations. I think that, it's hard to say what's like the rudest thing, right? Because then it's like, okay, what's the rudest thing somebody does when they're eating out, when they're dining? What's the rudest thing somebody does at work? What's the rudest thing somebody does at a wedding? Things like that. So they're all, they're all kind of interchangeable.
Right.
But for example, one of the biggest things I find is a lot about how people treat like wait staff and people.
Oh, yeah.
I did a podcast about this recently, and it's just this idea that they work for you. And I understand that they are serving you. But look, I was a waiter, busboy, host for, for many years. And they're just, that to me, I think is, you see people and how they act and how they treat people like that. It shows a lot of level to what they're willing to do for people that they, maybe whether or not they're doing it on purpose. So I find that to be a big one too. I also find the way that people slightly take advantage of people when it comes to dining. I sit with splitting the bill. This is something that has been, I cannot tell you how maddening it makes me. And when it goes to your second question about what's acceptable. So I'll give you an example for this one.
Right.
I find it insanely rude when somebody insists on splitting the bill and their portion was way bigger. I mean, look, me, you, and Marcy all go out for dinner. Okay. I have a burger. Marcy has a salad and a drink. And then you have a bottle of wine and a lobster. And we're supposed to split this thing. And I'm just
I know.
It drives me. But the thing is, and I tend to speak up. And I've gotten, and people are like, well, look, it's just a couple bucks. First of all, I'll do a couple bucks. I'm not a cheapo. But when it looks like I am paying for the lobster when I got the salad, it's like, wait a second. I mean, on what planet am I the rude one? Because you're insisting on doing it. I mean, if we go to Starbucks and I get one cup of coffee and you get a venti frappo, whatever coming on it, yours is $8 and mine's $2. Are we splitting this thing?
No.
Just from a standard appreciation, a respect level. So when somebody does that, I find that to be just incredibly rude, only because they don't care to look at what you had, and that they're just going to take advantage of it. And again, it's not about being cheap, and that's where like the part of like, how do you handle it? I mean, it's not about being cheap at all. It's just about basically being respectful about those around you. It's just,
so how do you bring that up though? How do you then go, look, wait, sorry, you had a bottle of wine, an appetizer, and a lobster. I had a salad. So
it's interesting because you'd be surprised when people don't say that. They're like,
all the time.
They won't say, oh no, I got 2 glasses of wine, you had a soda.
All the time.
And I mean, and they just go about it. So that's a pretty telltale sign of who that person is. But case in point, I went out maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. My wife and I went out with 2 other couples we've known for a while. They all had a lot of drinks. My wife doesn't drink. I don't drink too often, but I just had I think I might have had a beer that night. Yeah. But they had a couple of wine, which is totally fine. And they spoke up before, like, no, give me the bill. We pay for all the drinks. It's like, and like that. And look, they were close friends too, but no one needed to remind them. They're just naturally good people. And that's what's a huge difference. But when you fall into the situation where no one's speaking up, I try to be as slick and coy as I can with it. And just and I'm like, okay, well, look, I'll put in for here, and then you got your drinks, right? Okay, and I just do it that
smart.
Do what they say, because and again, if they're going to be a jerk about it, that shows more about who the person is, not so much you. I will never feel guilty about sticking up for myself and appearing rude for on that person, because really they are rude and they're so rude they can't realize they're rude.
Right.
But if they want to go back, like, yeah, I mean, this guy made me split the bill. It's ridiculous. What a cheap. And I'm like, okay, all right, go tell the person what you had. Then we'll talk. But so yeah, so I mean, I do a lot of the situations that I encounter regarding manners, I always try to match up with, encounter with some sort of humor or levity in a situation where I'm not charging at them. It's nothing that I'm not, you know, and again, if I'm the one doing it, I'm the first person to apologize for it too. So, but it's just more about having the casual approach to it.
You're like, hey, sorry, I had lobster and a wine. So thank you for, splitting that with me. Gotcha.
I appreciate it.
Here's the leftovers.
Yeah. I hope your chicken fingers were good. That's great. $6 versus mine.
So when it comes to like events and, and weddings, right? So that's part of our world here, Marcy and I, what is there a specific thing that you hear over and over about somebody that's being rude? Because I will tell you that the rudest thing you can do is cancel last minute for no other reason than I just don't want to go. Right. You already made that obligation. They already paid for your meal. So that money's lost. And now you've just said, I'm tired. I don't want to go. That to me is like.
Or bringing the +1 when there is no +1 to be invited.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. Well, I will say, my mom, she's hands down the wedding expert when it comes to these kinds of things. But from like the etiquette standpoint of what I've witnessed personally, I can tell you both those situations are two of my biggest. First of all, with the canceling or when people don't RSVP in time. If you don't, I know if someone sends me an invitation, says there's something a month out or 2 months out, I can easily look at my phone. This isn't, we don't have paper calendars anymore. And I know what's going on if I'm free or not. Do I want to go is the other question. Can I go is the other question. Like if I have to travel, okay, but I know that within, I don't know, 3 seconds of getting an invitation, if you want to go or not. And then whether you can make it is the other issue. So I agree with you. I think that whether or not you RSVP at the time, and then to wait till the last minute when the person's got to come to you and say, hey, by the way, look, are you really coming or not? And then you realize that point has already come where they're like either going to say yes or no. And then if you do bail after saying, oh yeah, I'm going to come, it looks even worse for you. You just tell them straight up you can't make it. If you have to lie, I'm not condoning lying, but I am condoning buying yourself some more time. They're never going to know, but it depends what level it is. Yeah. So that to me is the RSVP part is huge. Now, look, I have, for the holidays, for example, if I have a relative saying, hey, are you guys coming over to our house? And it's like, well, I got to check my kid's sports schedule. I'll let you know. And I do it to let them know a little bit later or closer as it gets. I try to be as good as I can with it. Something major like a wedding or a bat mitzvah or a party or whatever it may be, office event, there's no excuse. It's sad that you have to try to figure out a way to get out of it without just saying, look, I can't make it and just leave it at that. But to the same token, I also find it rude for the person to say, well, why not? Why can't you make it? Or why don't you want, just if you say no, you say no. I don't dig in. I mean, if somebody already says they can't make it, hey, sorry, I wish you could be there. That's it. And then go on.
Right.
I mean,
no quiz. That's what I'm saying. Just, just be upfront about it. I mean, nobody's going to take offense that you can't come to their wedding because they don't want to pay for you if you're not going to show up. So just, be upfront about that. The other thing that I find really, really rude is people interjecting their own thoughts about how the wedding should be, right? Mm-hmm. When they say, why are you doing a destination wedding? That's so rude to everybody. Like, and I'm okay, not your wedding. Like,
well, I remember, I mean, wedding. That part too is crazy. That's like also like the person that says, oh God, I don't like this dress I have to wear, or I don't like the suit I have to wear. I don't care what it is. I mean, like I've been very fortunate to be a best man in a couple weddings, a groomsman in many weddings, and I could care less if it was a clown theme. I don't care. Tell me what I have to wear and I'm wearing it. It's not mine. I have zero stake in the game, and I don't care what color looks best on me. I don't understand the go with the flow. And from like the destination part, one of my best friends, I was a groomsman at his wedding. And it was, he lives in Florida. It was on the beach. Look, it's not, I mean, I would have done anything in the world to be there for him anyway, but I made a conscious effort to go, and it's like, it's just one of these things that you have to carve out time to do. if it looks like it's going to break your bank, that is another thing that I don't think you should feel obligated to do. I mean, if I'm invited to a wedding and the destination is, Turks and Caicos or whatever, and it's going to cost me $3,000 on a flight and $5,000 to stay there, it's like, look, man, and I got you a present.
Right.
It starts to get a lot. But I do find that I don't know the right answer to say why do people do interject their own thoughts to it. It's just other than pure ego, I guess,
Right.
At my wedding, we did a band and we did like, oh, we did the crap. Like, it's just not, it's old. It just gets over with. And I also look at that when it comes to even just about somebody that goes to a wedding and they want to make their feelings known of their own thoughts. Like, oh my God, it is like, I really would have picked a much bigger place. It's like, well, you're just in there. You're happy to get invited, happy to step up to the plate.
Right.
And what Marcy was saying too about the +1. First of all, showing up with somebody else is ridiculous. That's just a no-go. I mean,
Right.
Showing up there, but also the people that are saying like, hey, look, Marcy, I saw the wedding. I don't have a +1. Can I have a +1? You're like, oh, sure. Let me give you a +1 and pay for this person who, and
Right.
that to me,
Right.
people ask for that all the time. And I don't think they realize the money of it. And it's not like you said, look,
no.
I don't know if you realize, but I just got engaged. Okay, fine. Your fiance can come, but ahead of time. But if you're like just looking for a +1 so you're not bored,
Right.
then you're paying for some rando that you're inviting to the wedding on Marcy's dime. It just doesn't, that to me is just beyond ridiculous.
Let me just say they do know because I guarantee you, if you offer a chicken and a steak, most of the people choose a steak because guess what? They're not paying for it. Yay.
Yeah.
And they're usually the ones that wind up dropping off at last minute anyway, because then they broke up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So and look, I've gone to weddings solo, especially during in COVID times. My wife and I was a best man in one of my friends' weddings or groomsmen, and it was outside. COVID was pretty much relaxed down, but people are still nervous about it. It was all outside. I totally respect that. I went by myself, perfectly fine. But I knew a lot of people there. It's a little bit different. I mean, I was in the wedding, but I was still by myself. I didn't care. I mean, it's just what you do. I went to another wedding around the same time of COVID. I hardly knew anybody there, but I went by myself because it was a good friend of mine that, I wanted to see him off and made the best I could. It's just part of what you got to do.
Here's the crazy thing is that we have this conversation and everybody probably listening or watching this podcast is saying the same thing. I agree. And yet we still have it. It's still rampant everywhere. So, at what point do you stand up to people and does that standing up then come across as rude? Because then it's really about a perspective.
That's just it right there. The perspective of it is not rude. And if you stand like, it's a big thing that I talk about a lot. I guess people are like, when it comes to like manners and etiquette, people almost think that because you're polite or you're not going to like make a big fuss that you're a pushover or you're weak. And I find that ridiculous as an argument to it, but it goes with the same sense where if you tell the person no and they get mad, that's on them. It's not the same way happened. I mean, we talked about COVID. There was a lot of things around COVID deferred events that you guys, I'm sure, have encountered. I went to a wedding and you had to have they had to have a vaccine. You had to have your vaccine card emailed over to the wedding to the person. It was like a month and a half ahead of time, perfect amount of time. And if you didn't, then you couldn't come. And some people were like, look, I'm not getting the vaccine. And it wasn't like a no vax, didn't want to do it or wherever the situation was. But they're like, I'm not bending. It's sorry. Then you're not coming, which is what it is. And the audacity of that person to have any argument on why they should or should not have a certain element to their wedding was just absurd to me.
I just find it's true. It's true. Yeah. It's crazy.
It is true.
It's a
Marcy, did you have something?
It's kind of like, like I'm not going to listen to you. You're not going to tell me what to do kind of attitude.
Yeah. Yeah. And that it's, and again, in regards to when people say like, can I do something or can I bring somebody or can I come here or that, or whatever the situation may be to the actual person of the event, and whether it's a wedding, bat mitzvah, even just a party and simple things like that. And they don't get the response they need and they get mad. That's on them. That's just not being able to handle it very well in general.
So Richie, I'm actually talking about rudeness. We actually have a third person. Her name is Brooke Logan Stoner. She's been part of our podcast since the very beginning. And I was like, I guess she's not showing up.
I'm here.
I was like, okay, let's talk about lateness. Okay, let's talk about lateness being rude.
Am I
She's like,
15? Oh yeah, you got me. I'm past 15, so
I was 25 minutes. 25 minutes. Okay.
Nice to meet you, Brooke.
Oh my goodness.
likewise. I've been following along and listening, so I know a few things. I've heard a few things. So
Good.
So what do you? So with this new book, you've got a new book that's coming out next year, right?
Yes.
What is the book about? So
Yeah. So
because you sounded, you were very excited about this before our pre-show, and we didn't talk much about it because I really wanted you to talk about it on the show. So what is it?
okay. So yeah, I mean, since I started writing, I mean, I've been a professional writer for the past 20 years, and I've written children's books, had a novel, the Manners book. So this book that I'm coming out with now is totally different from what I've ever written before. It's a memoir, my debut memoir, but it's called The Optimistics. And what it's about is about three men that have young onset dementia and all became best friends and called themselves the Optimistics. So when you think of Alzheimer's, it's obviously it's a very hard topic. But young onset is Alzheimer's before the age of 65. So these are people that are in their 50s and had to stop their careers and stop really the progression of their lives in professional and personal manner because of Alzheimer's. And these three guys met each other right around the COVID time, and they just became best buddies. And the idea of and they call themselves the Optimistics, and that message grew out. So when I first met them, I was doing an Alzheimer's walk in Baltimore last year, around this time actually, and I heard one of them talk. He was giving a talk about the Optimistics right before the race. They did it at the podium, and I was like, "Wow, that's such an amazing thing." I mean, the term of being optimistic, and which is a very hard thing to do, let alone when you're facing that. And I was like, I couldn't, as a writer, I have all these ideas. My desktop is filled with dozens of ideas that will never hear the light of day, but I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I just reached out to the family and said, and I knew somebody that knew him. I mean, Baltimore's a small town. And so one thing led to another. I was like, look, I can't promise anything. I can't tell you what this is going to look like, but I really think it's an idea I really want people to understand this story and what you guys are doing. And I have my grandmother died of Alzheimer's. My wife's grandmother had Alzheimer's. It's something that you see, and everybody has some kind of connection to it.
Yeah, 100%.
But the idea of the Optimistics echoed, and there's a lot more people out there. So in the book, I interviewed dozens and dozens of people and families who have gone through this and what it's like to how they remained optimistic. And I kind of call it like a Tuesday with Morrie vibe of how, about where your life is and how you look at things differently. And what started out just being focusing on the three guys as the Optimistics has evolved into their mission, into their message or mantra, and echoed across the country. I mean, there's people that are going to be in the book. There is a gentleman in California that, his wife has Alzheimer's and early 50s. And there's a question about, can you date when your spouse is not going to be, and how it was like where he had a very active life. He spends, to say six figures is a low amount in her care. But she is on the edge of part of her illness where there is no coming back, and he's accepted it and he sees her all the time. But how do you live your life outside of that? And then there's other areas where when the roles reversal, I mean, the men who have this and now their wives are having the men in majority of the situation were making more money than the women. They were the breadwinners of the family, and all of a sudden they stopped their careers in their 50s. I mean, that's really when things are starting to kind of
that's when we're finally getting it done.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
come on.
all of a sudden, I mean, one of the gentlemen in the books, he was a big time CFO at a hospital, and early 50s, there he is, and he's having to retire. It's a lot, and
it's a lot. I'm just saying. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah, and we talked to everybody I talked to. I mean, it was a lot of tears in all my interviews with them, but it was also very inspiring. I mean, it is inspiring, but it was tears of joy, and they understood what we were doing, and they appreciated it. So I'm thrilled to do it. I mean, it's it's something that's really important to me, but I will say about the date of when it's coming out. In a normal publishing world, right? You write a book. If I sign a contract today with Keith Publishing Company, in the big fives of the world, it would
Put
be
that up to the universe.
yeah, it would come out in probably 18 months to bookshelves.
Right.
That's at the very minimum, right?
Right.
And that's on like the big five publishers, which Macmillan Publishing is, they own Modern Manners Guy and stuff like that. So I'm utilizing a different publisher, and I said, look, time is very important here, because there's a good chance that people in the book may not be around in 24 months or 18 months or 12 months.
100%.
And if they are, they might not be able to remember the book enough to appreciate what they did into it. So I had to take that into consideration and really say, and I started the minute I met the group and I started putting stuff together. I was pitching the book and saying, look, guys, I'm glad you like it, but this is a time thing. I can't wait till, Christmas of 25 for this thing to come out. Right. So when I met with a publisher, with one of the publishers that had published one of the previous books, I said, if we're going to do this, you have to understand the time frame of this, and we'll give it the proper marketing time, the whole business back end of logistic stuff. But
right.
It's really about, we got to make sure we pull this thing off at a certain time.
You're like, I don't want to be rude, but this time is as of the essence. But that's the other thing, to pull in the whole rudeness piece in here too. If you knew people's backstories, typically you would not be rude to people, because everybody does have a backstory.
And there's a lot of things everybody's going through that you would never know by seeing them. And I mean, I learned a lot with with my work with the Alzheimer's Association. And I go to a meeting once a month with the Young Onset group in Baltimore. And naively, I said at the beginning, I said, I wouldn't know that he had Alzheimer's. And then somebody said to me, like, well, what does it look like? And I'm like, it's a goddamn good question right there. Okay.
Right?
So
that is a good damn question, because seriously, what does it look like? Because
what does somebody,
you don't see them forgetting stuff.
It's not, I associated Alzheimer's with my grandmother when she was in her, late 70s in a nursing home. And, there was a bad memory, but that's what you associate it with, not somebody that, looks like they just walked off a golf course. Right. And so it was that idea of what people look like. So when you do think about, okay, you're rude in how you treat people, nobody's perfect. You're allowed to get mad at people and apologize later for it. But yes, you don't know what everybody's going through. Not everything.
Don't ask permission, ask forgiveness.
Yeah.
I was about to say, Brooke, a few things about having.
So do we have an estimated ETA?
Yeah. So
when
is it?
Oh, April 2024. So yeah.
Excellent.
Spring, April.
Corner-ish.
It's right around the corner. Later. It really is. I mean, it's just incredible what you're doing. I mean, you went from pro wrestler to this. Sorry, I had to put that back in there.
I know a lot of people really don't believe it.
I'm sorry, I'm late.
No, I have one of the masks. Here's one of the masks I wore back in the day. This is not mine. This is actually a former wrestler, but I did wear a mask, and I for all the mask people who are out wrestling the mask, it's very, very suffocating here. I'm not.
Was it WWF or WCW?
I did not wear it. What'd you say?
What was
WWF?
M? Was it an M on the mask?
This is another wrestler out there, but my wrestling name
who's that?
This is Mil Mascaris. He's a very famous luchador. My wrestling name was the Throw from Israel, Buster Maccabee. So I put the N for that.
I remember.
Why do you find that funny? What's so funny about that?
I love it. I think it's great.
Oh, I didn't want to be rude about that. That's funny.
Here's one of my, because you got to live in the past and enjoy the glory days. I have my championship belt I always keep for my son.
That's funny. Oh my God, Richie, you have been an absolute pleasure. This was really, seriously incredible. So again, Richie Frieman, truly a modern day Renaissance man. Seriously, I cannot wait to dive into this book.
I know.
The optimistics. I mean, the idea of being optimistic in the face of such challenging issues. And I mean, think about that. I mean, that's end of life type of stuff. And
what is the book about? What's the book give me a brief, real quick. What's the book? What's in it?
I mean, it's about the patient's Alzheimer's.
Adequate.
Yeah.
Is there a chapter on
relationships and
with a fork if you have your our elbows on the table?
No, the optimistic is not about etiquette, but that's a different book I have.
It's more about the relationships the person is having in their life while going through dementia, right?
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, we switched topics a little bit. Anyway, again, Richie,
That's what I get for being late.
no worries. If people wanted to find out more about you, more about this book, how do they do that?
Great. Well, thank you, Barry. You can just reach out on social media at Richie Frieman on Instagram, at Modern Manners Guy on Instagram, and we're growing our TikTok as well. And then quick and dirty tips, QDT. You can look out for Modern Manners Guy. Download the podcast off Apple or Spotify, any of the streamers. And anything else, just reach out to me. Happy to reach out and talk to anybody.
Thank you again. You've been an amazing guest. I can't wait to read the book. Hopefully we can have you
Richie.
back on after the book is released. And so we'll see you next Tuesday at 2:00. But for now, we're going to say goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Great job.